Good morning and welcome to the Dr. Martin Luther King Community Breakfast. Happy to have you, and we're happy to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King today. He was a Nobel laureate that taught us that the most powerful rebuttal to battering batons, barking dogs, and barrages of water in the pursuit of civil rights was to strike back against the conscience and heart of a nation. On the surface, Dr. King's cause was civil rights. Dive deeper into that, and one begins to understand that this encompassed unconditional equality in schooling, public accommodation, housing, voters' rights, and all that comprises the pursuit of happiness. Endeavoring to achieve these ends, Dr. King adamantly advocated and espoused for peaceful protest. Adversaries to his mission were both external and internal, the latter of which included a faction of organizers who believed peaceful protest could never materialize the monumental change that the movement sought. Dr. King approached this division diplomatically. He strived to bring the inclusive world he dreamed and spoke about into reality by doing something the movement had never done and our nation had never seen internally before. Today we celebrate his work. Doing so, we will be hearing from today's keynote speaker, Representative Byron, on how to perpetuate Dr. King's legacy in perpetuity. Later we will hear from the group Black in Belmont and Belmont Against Racism to include the fabric of our community into today's quilt of discussion. However, at the moment, I kindly ask that you join me in honoring our nation as the Belmont High School Chamber Singers perform our national anthem under the leadership of Director Sean Landers.
Please rise.
Thank you. We are grateful to gather here today and remember the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. We are able to do so with the help of both the Belmont Public Schools Superintendent's Office and the front office of the Belmont High School under Principal Daniel Richards. He's been gracious enough to host us, and it is only fitting that as our host, he welcomes us. Principal Richards.
Good morning. On behalf of the administration, faculty, and students of the Belmont Public Schools, I'd like to welcome you to this special event. This is my 12th year I've been associated with the Belmont Martin Luther King Breakfast, and I'm always encouraged and energized by the turnout of so many community members. Thank you for your dedication and commitment to Dr. King's vision and to the students of the Belmont Public Schools. Thank you. I am honored that Belmont High School is able to host this event, which raises funds for the after-school transportation and tutoring for students who participate in the MEDCO program. The after-school transportation program allows students to participate in sports and extracurricular activities with the assurance that they will have a safe trip back home at the end of the school day. Because of your commitment to our youth, they are afforded a rich high school experience that they will always remember. Your commitment is shaping individuals by building their confidence, fostering positive relationships, and developing leadership skills necessary for our students to be successful well beyond their time here at Belmont High School. Your commitment is a direct reflection of Dr. King's message of equality, unity, and respect. Because Dr. King was not able to fulfill his "I Have a Dream" speech, it is of great responsibility and importance that each of us look inward and live that dream for him. If Dr. King were here today, I am confident that he would share his wisdom and remind us to stay the course, don't get discouraged, and lead by example. Each year, your presence and commitment at the Belmont MLK Breakfast is a representation of his wisdom and courage Dr. King spoke of. Together, as a community, we have and always will remain together to stay the course and lead as a community. Thank you for your dedication in supporting the students of the Belmont Public Schools. At this time, I would like to introduce Doug John, former bishop from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Please come to the podium.
Please join me in prayer. Dear God, we're thankful to be gathered as friends and neighbors to commemorate the life of Martin Luther King and reflect on the principles he taught and the work still to be done to bring justice and equality into this world. We're grateful for those who have organized this event and for those who will participate in the program. Please bless them that they may express themselves in words or music to the best of their ability. Open our minds that we will understand, and our hearts that we can commit ourselves more fully to living up to the ideals Dr. King taught. Bless those presently experiencing injustice, prejudice, distress, or physical suffering, and give us courage and strength to bring positive change to ease their plight. Help us as a community to do our part. Bless the leaders of our nation that they may seek more civility and cooperation to relieve suffering and injustice. We're thankful for the progress that has been made, but pray for guidance and strength to push Dr. King's dream closer to reality. We ask for thy spirit and blessing upon this meeting. In the name of our Lord, amen.
Today we have with us Representative Dave Rogers. Representative Rogers represents the 24th Middlesex District, which is all of Belmont and parts of Arlington and Cambridge. He serves on both the Joint and House Committees on Ways and Means, the House Committee on Redistricting, and House Personnel and Administration Committee, among others. He worked on last year's Criminal Justice Reform Bill, which makes it illegal for pregnant women and juveniles to be put in solitary confinement, repeals onerous mandatory minimums, and reforms fines and fees levied by the courts of the Commonwealth that cause financial hardship, among other things. Additionally, he expanded on the Affordable Care Act here in the Commonwealth through co-sponsoring the Advancing Contraception Coverage and Economic Security in our state bill. I am grateful for the help that he extended to us and to have him here with us today. I welcome Representative Rogers to the podium to deliver his remarks.
Good morning, everybody, and another packed event, and this event is just fantastic. I want to thank Belmont Against Racism, the Human Rights Commission, the Religious Council, and so many other organizations that make this event a success. And not just this event, but all through the year, the work they do helps make Belmont a wonderful community. And today, maybe more than ever, is a chance now to continue to reflect on the legacy of Dr. King. And I don't think I even need to say why it's particularly of the moment. And for me today, it's a particular joy to get a chance to introduce our keynote speaker, my colleague and friend, Majority Whip, and one of the greatest leaders in our state government, Representative Byron Rushing. And the lucky thing for me is, while you might call him Representative, I get to call him Byron. And Byron has a long history of community organizing and fighting for civil rights and equal opportunity. In the 1960s, he was active in CORE, the Congress for Racial Equality. Leader Rushing was subsequently the president of the Museum of African American History. Under his leadership, the museum purchased and preserved the African Meeting House, which is the oldest black church building still in existence in the country. He also led the effort to establish the Boston African American National Historic Site, which is part of the National Park Service. So the list could go on and on and on. Elected to the House in 1982, Byron has continued to work to fight for disenfranchised populations. He was the original sponsor of the Marriage Equality Bill. He's been a leader on trying to end homelessness. He now co-chairs the Health Disparities Council in our state. And he does not rest on his laurels, that is for sure. Every week we meet in his office and talk about criminal justice reform, environmental protection, on and on and on. Byron continues to fight every day to make the world a better place. And he's a cool guy. He's a great guy. Kind, gracious, funny, smart. He's the kind of person we'd all like to work with, a wonderful colleague. And I can tell you he gets invited to events on a day like this all over the state. And keep in mind, he has his own district where he gets invited to tons of events. So for him to come here is really a special thing. Please welcome Representative Byron Rushing.
So, good morning, and thank you very much for that kind welcome. Thank you very much, Dave, for those kind remarks in your introduction. It is always good to come to events like this and see people who are familiar. So I want to just thank my friends who have woken up so early in the morning so that I would be nice to them the next time I see them. But I especially want to thank David. You should know that when Tony, the chair of the Rights Commission, I think thought I was not responding quick enough to his invitation to be with you this morning, that he set David on me, and it all got settled right away. It's also always good to be with my other colleague from these parts, your Senator, Will Brownsberger, but it is especially fun for me to be again with your former state representative and my former seatmate, Representative Ann Paulson. Today, this year, we again commemorate Martin Luther King Jr. And when we commemorate Martin Luther King Jr., we are commemorating more than just one great man. When we commemorate Martin Luther King Jr., we commemorate not one man, but a whole race, a people, a community of men and women of African descent, which was and is his heritage, from which he was derived. When we commemorate Martin Luther King, we commemorate not only one man, but a whole movement. The African American Civil Rights Movement, a movement not led by one man alone, but also by women and men like Ida B. Wells, W.B. Du Bois, William Monroe Trotter, James Weldon Johnson, A. Philip Randolph, Ella Baker, Rosa Parks, Bayard Rustin, James Farmer, Septima Clark, Diane Nash, Stokely Carmichael, Fannie Lou Hamer, and thousands of others, women and men, and even girls and boys who struggled with their eyes on the prize. When we commemorate Martin Luther King, we commemorate all who have struggled for justice and freedom and peace in the Babylons of oppression and slavery and violence in our land and throughout the world. So today, this morning, we gather to commemorate Martin Luther King and to honor all who by faith are true to what they know is intrinsically true. If we are to be faithful, then to this commemoration, faithful to all the work and sacrifice of so many to bring us here, faithful to the controversies along the path to here, we must come to ask this question: can we, in this commemoration of all of these movements for justice, can we commemorate ourselves? Can we commemorate ourselves in this legacy of so many? Where do we fit in the legacy of Martin Luther King? To help us answer these questions, we have his words, that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We have the classic white, male, radical statements of the American Revolution. To help us answer these questions, we have his words that the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. To answer these questions, then, we have the history of our nation. We have the history of our nation defined by one of the profound, incredible, horrible institutions without which it would not be here. We have the understanding, we have the memory of slavery. That one day, as he said, every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. For those of you who don't read that book very often, he, of course, was quoting Isaiah from the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures. And we have an understanding of this world that is philosophical and theological. And we have these words, that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Can we find ourselves in all of those places? The 1963 March on Washington and this speech that he gave near the end of that afternoon was brilliant and profound. However, it should not be used to freeze him in that particular time, that particular hour. It is interesting that Martin reflected on that time in many sermons and speeches after 1963. In one, on Christmas Eve in 1967, he thought about it this way. In 1963, on a sweltering August afternoon, we stood in Washington, D.C. and talked to the nation about many things. Toward the end of the afternoon, I tried to talk to the nation about a dream that I had had. And I must confess to you today that not too long after talking about that dream, I started seeing it turn into a nightmare. I remember the first time the dream turned into a nightmare. Just a few weeks after I had talked about it, it was when 4 beautiful, unoffending, innocent Negro girls were murdered in a church building in Birmingham, Alabama, blown up. I watched that dream turn into a nightmare as I moved through the ghettos of the nation and saw my black brothers and sisters perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. I saw that dream turn into a nightmare as I watched the war in Vietnam escalating. Yes, I am personally the victim of deferred dreams, of blasted hopes. But in spite of that, I close today by saying I still have a dream, because you know you can't give up in life. So this morning, let us reflect and answer questions like, can we commemorate ourselves? Can we commemorate ourselves in this legacy of so many? Where do we fit in the legacy of Martin Luther King? Which brings me to my title, which Tony also insisted on. So, everyone has noticed the title? So you are all ready for this question. Everyone here who is under 50 years old, raise your hand. Raise them a little higher. All right. And although we know the answer now by default for this next question, Let's have everyone who is here over 50 raise your hands. Thank you. And you know, of course, why I'm doing that. Martin Luther King was born January 15th, 1929. Martin Luther King was assassinated April 4th, 1968. April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King was 39 years old. This April 4th will be the 50th anniversary of that assassination. If Martin Luther King were alive, he would be 89 years old. This is his 89th birthday. So those of you who only know about Martin Luther King because you have read about him, hopefully all voluntarily, or seen clips of him that have been preserved from television and film, and of course heard over and over so many times him saying those words from 1963 in Washington. How does it make sense? What does it mean to you? And those of us who had the experience, for some of us a privilege, to be around when he was alive, what did we learn then that we can communicate now? What did we learn then that we can say to others who are younger, but also say to ourselves? Let me remind all of us that most people did not like him. Most people in the United States thought that parts of what he said made sense sometimes, but most of what he said neither made sense or seemed relevant. If all the people who after 1968 who said they supported Martin Luther King had supported Martin Luther King, we would be a lot further in this country than we are now. In lots of ways, Martin Luther King is like the Underground Railroad. After the Civil War, everybody had a station in their basement. So let me just insert here for a moment a brief curriculum. For those of you who are reading, continue to read. But read those books that describe the society that existed then, as well as Martin and his work himself. Bite the bullet and start reading Branch Taylor's 3 volumes. Be sure to read David Garrow so you will get a sense of the incredible, organized, official, tax-supported attempts to discredit Martin Luther King at every turn, led by the FBI. And be sure to read about him from the point of view of other revolutionaries and people of color, and read Michael Eric Dyson. Try to end this year reading something by Martin Luther King other than the speech at the March on Washington. So that's my insertion of a curriculum for you for the rest of the year. Right after the March on Washington, on August 30th, 1963, William C. Sullivan, a member of the FBI who led the FBI's intelligence operations, wrote a memo to his boss, J. Edgar Hoover. Those of you who like trivia, William Sullivan actually came from Massachusetts. He was born in Hudson. And he wrote, "Personally, I believe in the light of King's powerful, demagogic speech yesterday, he stands head and shoulders over all other Negro leaders put together when it comes to influencing great masses of Negroes. We must mark him now, if we have not done so before, as the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation from the standpoint of communism, the Negro and national security." In a subsequent memo, Sullivan would write to Hoover, "It should be clear to all of us that King must, at some propitious point in the future, be revealed to the people of this country and to his Negro followers as being what he actually is, a fraud, demagogue, and scoundrel. When the true facts concerning his activities are presented, such should be enough, if handled properly, to take him off his pedestal and reduce him completely in influence." The most dangerous Negro. What was so dangerous about Martin Luther King? He would describe himself like this: "I'd like for somebody to say that day when he dies, I would like somebody to say that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity." He believed in jobs and decent salaries, alliances with the trade union movement. He died, of course, supporting the garbage workers' strike in Memphis. He believed in coalitions with all progressive poor and working class people in ending poverty. He believed in nonviolence. In his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, he said, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant." He believed in ending the war. He believed in ending war. For him, it was opposition to the war in Vietnam. In 1967, at the Riverside Church in New York City, he said, "We still have a choice today, nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. We must move past indecision to action. We must find new ways to speak for peace and justice throughout the developing world, a world that borders on our doors. If we do not act, we shall surely be dragged down the long, dark, and shameful corridors of time reserved for those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, strength without sight." For these words, he was criticized by his friends and enemies. The New York Times editorial board, which loved him dearly until that day, wrote, "In recent speeches and statements, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has linked his personal opposition to the war in Vietnam with the cause of Negro equality in the United States. The war," he argues, "should be stopped not only because it is a futile war waged for the wrong ends, but also because it is a barrier to social progress in this country and therefore prevents Negroes from achieving their just place in American society. This fusing of two public problems that are distinct and separate, by drawing them together, Dr. King has done a disservice to both. The moral issues in Vietnam are less clear-cut than he suggests. The political strategy for uniting the peace movement and the civil rights movement could very well be disastrous for both causes." The NAACP called King that King had made a serious tactical error. And I am sure, as I probably think you are, that if he had lived longer, the words Afghanistan and Iraq and so-called war on terror would have been included in that speech. So, what was dangerous about this Negro? He believed in jobs and decent salaries for everyone. He worked for that. He believed that poverty could be ended everywhere. He worked for that. He believed in coalitions with all progressive, poor, and working-class people. 4 months before he was assassinated, Martin Luther King announced the Poor People's Campaign, a middle ground between the riots on one hand, he said, and timid supplications for justice on the other. He planned an initial group of 2,000 people to descend on Washington, D.C., to meet with government officials and demand jobs. After his assassination, the Southern Christian Leadership Council decided to go on a campaign under the leadership of Ralph Abernathy to do just that. On Mother's Day, May 12, 1968, thousands of women, led by Coretta Scott King, formed the first wave of demonstrators. And the following day, Resurrection City, a temporary settlement of tents and shacks, was built on the mall in Washington, D.C. Remember, the title of the 1963 march was March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. The 1968 slogan was, "We, the poor people of America, demand decent jobs and income, the right to a decent life." Midway through that campaign, Robert Kennedy, whose wife had attended the Mother's Day opening of Resurrection City, Robert Kennedy was assassinated on June 6th. Out of respect for the campaign, his funeral procession passed through Resurrection City. Resurrection City closed in June 24th of that year, after its permit was with the Park Service was not renewed. To be part of his legacy, we cannot tolerate anyone in this city or state or nation being homeless. To be part of his legacy, we cannot tolerate anyone being deprived of health care. We cannot tolerate a criminal justice system that does not expend more of its resources on rehabilitated reentry than it does on incarceration and punishment. To be part of this legacy, we must understand all human beings as being their essential nature. So, what do we do next? What is remarkable about the movement that Martin Luther King led and the movement that he influenced was that their goal, in its incredible positive way, was destruction. It was destruction of every institution that was inhumane. It was the destruction of every part of our culture and society that does not raise up and support and proclaim every human being. Therefore, it called for the destruction of racism. Understand racism as a part of our culture, that is so ingrained that we take it for granted, and most times, unless it is uttered in incredibly outlandish and bigoted ways, not noticed. It is institutional. Understand that our call for peace must call at the same time for the destruction of militarism as a concept in our culture and in our society. Oh yes, I think I agree with Michael Sullivan. We are commemorating a dangerous Negro today. And if we are going to find ourselves in this commemoration, may I suggest this, that we join in this movement to destroy the destructive, that we join in this movement to resurrect the constructive, to find our way, not only in understanding and believing, but leading the movement to a society, starting with our own and with our neighbors, that respects every human being. So that leaves us, it seems, with this response: be dangerous. Let us leave this place being dangerous Negroes. All of us. Let us leave this place figuring out all the dangerous things that must be done. And of course, we will be criticized. And of course, it will be controversial. But as Martin Luther King says, of course, we will win. Go forth, dangerous Negroes.
Thank you so much, Representative Rushing, for those words. I'm happy to say that we've got about 10 minutes or so for some questions and answers. So go ahead and raise your hand. I'll come over and you can ask them your question. I'd like to, before doing so, I'd like to say that in my experience, I've learned that it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. So thank you for giving me what I requested from your office. I wasn't trying to be an annoyance, though I know I can be. So thank you. But I see a question here, and if you wouldn't mind just stating your name and standing and asking your question.
My name is Lisa Tripp, and I'm 75 years old, so I was there during the civil rights movement. What I wanted to point out is so few people ascribe to King his incredible deep patriotism. I don't think he ever looked at other countries. He is as American as you can be, and I hope that people will realize his patriotism was an enormous legacy.
We have a question.
Yes, Richard Rowe. Can you give us an example of one dangerous thing that we in Belmont should now be taking?
All right. You didn't write me a letter before I got here. I would say that one dangerous thing that Belmont and other towns, are you a town or a city? I can't remember. You're a town, good for you. I was so upset about Framingham. Is how segregated you are. And you are not segregated because Belmont is segregated. You are segregated because we live in a segregated state, in a segregated country, racially segregated country. We live in one of the most, this country is more, residentially more segregated now than it has ever been in its history. Our schools are more segregated than they were in 1954. I say 1954, for the younger people, 1954 is when the Supreme Court decision came down on ending de jure segregation in public schools. Right? What we need to figure out is what we do to end that, or decrease and end that residential segregation in this country. And we cannot do that without dealing with the issue of money and class. We have to, everyone here has to agree to live with people who are poorer than they are on their same block. Everybody. And if you're not willing to do that, dangerous thing, right, you will always be busing those nice people in. I was with Bonnie Frank the other night. Bonnie has gotten more outrageous about this position than I am. But he always uses my district as an example of what he can't understand about wealthy white people living near poor people. He always says, go to the South End. Will they just go to the South End? And it is sort of remarkable. And Bonnie's right. So in my district, I represent, of course, the oldest gentrified neighborhood in Boston. It is also probably the only gentrified neighborhood in the United States that has the most affordable housing. In my district, where where people were active enough that we destroyed no public housing when gentrification came in and went on, you now can live 1 block away from public housing in a $4 million house. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, of course, the person who decided to buy that house and buy all the condos that were in that house and turn it back into a one-family house and get it completely remodeled, right, at a total cost of $4 million, that person felt entitled, felt that they could choose, because of their money, to live anywhere they wanted to. And it was okay to live where they chose to live. But my guess is that wherever that person lived 10 years ago, if someone had suggested they would build the public housing in that town next to him, 1 block away from him, that would never have happened. Blow it up, integrate this town residentially.
I have a question for you, Representative Rushing. I am a millennial. I was born in 1990, and a lot of people in my generation believe that a Facebook post or tweet is sufficient to, it's taking action. However, I see that as inaction. I think that's just typing something out and there you're done for the day, you've done your work. Could you please talk about the danger of inaction, not doing something, or doing something that's not sufficient to a movement?
I think the answer to that question is clearly following the whole range of tactics that were used in the civil rights movement and bringing those tactics up to our 21st century technology. You can be very sure that Martin Luther King would certainly have had his staff writing his tweets, but they would have been coming out on a regular basis. You can be very sure that the Southern Christian Leadership Council and, of course, CORE and the NAACP in those days would all have had Facebook pages and websites. All of those things, but they understood those things just like they would, I assume, understand those things just like they understood picketing and civil disobedience. It was toward a goal. And what I ask everyone of whatever ages is to remember the importance of coming together, deciding on the goal, and working toward that goal using every means that is creative and possible.
See, what time for one last question here.
And she'd get to ask that question even if the time was up. She'd be able to ask it.
Thank you, Byron. I just want to make a comment, and one is that Judith Fines is bringing an affordable housing plan to the planning board on Thursday evening. And I think that is an opportunity for people in this community to go to the planning board with Judith Fines and her affordable housing group, of which many people here are members, and raise the voice at that and be dangerous. But I would just also like to ask Byron one question, and that is that there are lots of things before the legislature, and you mentioned a lot of them about ending homelessness, incarceration, and I know Will works very hard on that. So what is the one, not everything gets passed in a legislative session, so what is the one item that you think 300 people could get behind and make a determination and say, you know, this is the one thing we're going to beat on the legislature to get this passed? And what would be the one thing you think we should get behind?
So let me give you three. Make sure Will and all the rest of us do criminal justice. We're almost there. We're almost there. And let us figure out how we are going to go into the next decade, making sure that every child in this state is educated to their absolute ability, which is, of course, great. That no child should be deprived of a decent education in this state, and I think we have to start with figuring out how we change the funding scheme for how we do that. And finally, and since all of these things, of course, I'm not mentioning raising taxes because all of this stuff is talking about raising taxes. You know what? If you're not going to spend any money on this, none of it's going to happen. And then finally, let us deal with the problem of housing for people who have no homes. There is no reason. Affordable housing is a huge problem, but there is no reason why this very small piece of affordable housing cannot be solved soon, and that is everyone should be able to have a place to live in this state. I want to make sure that you see, this is what happens when you have politicians run your great breakfasts. We have to recognize everybody. I want David to come up and help me recognize everybody that I might have missed.
Well, how about another warm hand for Byron Rushing? Just quickly, I happen to notice some of our elected officials are here. District Attorney Belmont's own Marion Ryan is here. Selectman Mark Polillo is here. And Selectman Adam Dash is here. And I don't know if I missed anyone else. If so, just stand up and say hello. Oh, of course. Well, I thought he was already introduced. Senator Will Brownsberger, of course, is here. So, Police Chief Richard McLaughlin is here. Glad I didn't miss that one. Oh, I'm sorry. Our new town administrator is here. Jean Perino? So new I don't have her name down yet? Patrice Garvin. So, thank you. Tony?
Thank you to both Representative Rogers and Rushing. We're very grateful to have you both, and thank you for those remarks. Now I'd like to join in listening to Lift Every Voice by the Chamber Singers.
And if you'll indulge me for one moment, my favorite MLK quote is, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that."
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. our Father's side. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless our feet straight from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
We're going to shift our scope now to focus locally. We've got two local groups to help us do that, the first of which is Black in Belmont. I'd like to invite Lindsay Rinder to the podium to introduce Black in Belmont.
Hello, everyone. I am so happy to be here today to introduce three members of a very important student group that has just begun in the past year here at Belmont High School, Black in Belmont. That's right. The group began last February when a group of educators, teachers and administrators here at the high school invited a group of students to come speak with them about what it was like to be Black in Belmont. The educators were curious and committed, and I can hold myself chief among them in this regard, ignorant about what it was really like to be Black in Belmont. The students were brave. They were courageous. They were dangerous. They will continue to be so. They have, since that conversation, which then evolved into a weekly conversation and finally into the group that we call Black in Belmont, now with its own formal advisor, Mr. Hakeem Barge, who unfortunately could not be here today. That group has given 4 presentations over the past 11 months to faculty and staff. They, earlier this week, gave a community presentation with Dorothy Stoneman, who is here today, and the Beyond Ferguson group. And 3 members are here with us to speak to you now. So I am very pleased to ask Barbara Joseph, Crystal Naiga Magandazi, and Zachary Stewart to come to the podium.
There you go. I'm afraid I'm a tad bit short, so yeah. Good morning. For those who don't know me, my name is Barbara Joseph, and I'm a current senior here. And I would just like to introduce these 2 people behind me. They will be reading their statements that was sent to Mrs. Pritchard for a presentation that she's going to be doing with her class. So, Zachary Stewart.
Good morning. I'm a little nervous standing up here. I actually wasn't anticipating speaking today. Okay. As an African American male, I have to live in a world that is not built by me or for me. I need to fight for everything I have, and sometimes it's still not enough. When I moved here at the beginning of freshman year, I was apprehensive because I had never been around so many white people. However, I have been accepted by students, teachers, and administrators alike, and I greatly appreciate it. Belmont has its issues, but there are people who are doing everything in their power to enact change here. It won't happen overnight, but my hope for the future is that there will be a time that everyone will really be equal, not equal in air quotes, and that skin color won't determine your status. I'd also just like to say thank you to Mr. Richards and Ms. Rinder and all of the teachers and advisors who have helped us form Black in Belmont and who have given us the time and the space that we need in order to come together and be ourselves and not be judged by either by teachers or fellow students, and to just have that space where we can truly be ourselves. And I'd like to thank Mr. Rushing for taking the time to come out today. And I'd also like to thank Dr. King, because if it weren't for him and if it weren't for men like him and women and children, I would not be standing up here today talking to you all. I would probably be at home, most likely, going to an all-black school somewhere else that is not here. And I thank Dr. King for his sacrifice and for allowing me to stand here in front of you today. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name's Crystal. I'm a little bit nervous, but it's okay. I think that one of the most difficult things about being a minority in a majority Caucasian school is that no matter how hard you try, you'll often be seen as that black kid. To some black people, you'll never be black enough unless you conform to their interests. I've personally found this difficult because I'm not interested in rap, dancing, or any other stereotypical interests that people of color may have. Therefore, my persona is what most people would characterize as quote unquote white, yet my complexion says otherwise. Although none of my white friends outwardly express the differences we share, I feel the difference in our lunchrooms. Groups of a particular race will sit somewhere while the others sit somewhere else. Although some do intermingle and sit together, I wish that we would have various friend groups despite our differences. I wish that people would realize we are more alike than we seem. And to quote Martin Luther King, we must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening to that. There you go. I stand before you today to not only express my everyday experience here in Belmont, but to help dismantle the preconceived notion associated with people of color. My morning starts off with, like every other typical Mormon girl. I wake up around 5:30, 5:45, and I get up and head to seminary. For those who don't know what seminary is, it's like church school before school. But what most of you may not know is that at home, I am just a kid. When I step out of those doors, I'm a black kid. For the most part, ignorance is in correspondence to the lack of knowledge. And some may argue, for my generation, that ignorance is the result of what we read in our textbooks, watch on TV, and posts we see on social platforms. In the words of James Baldwin, if you know whence you came, there are absolutely no limitations to where you can go. In order to take a step forward, we must take a few steps back and look into the past. Unfortunately, as a black child, I have been bombarded with tales of lynchings, the inability to sit in front of a bus, the talk of inequality, and the misrepresentation of those who resemble me in the mass media. And I am tired. In order to make change, we must not only acknowledge Martin and his doings for our nation, but Dorothy Height, Bayard Rustin, John Lewis, Gloria Richardson, and so on and so forth. It is our duty to provoke empowerment for the children of color and to instill both empathy and the desire to assist amongst our nation. For it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Thank you.
Thank you to all three of you. You guys did great despite the fact that you were nervous. Honestly, couldn't tell. And I think that everyone here, I speak for everyone here when we say we immensely value your contribution to today. And it's great to see high school students pick up a cause so young. So I would like to offer my thought that I hope you stick with it. You know, pick a cause and run with it. It's most important to stay devoted to something rather than just pick something up. So stay after it, and you're going to only surprise yourself with how successful you're going to do with advocating for something so important. So we're going to like to work something different into the program this year, and that is the opportunity for everyone at the tables to discuss with one another and meet someone maybe you haven't met before, and even take this time to maybe fill up on coffee or grab a glass of water. But before I leave you, I'd like to leave you with a point of discussion that you might be able to take up if you so feel. And that is to discuss a memory that you have of the occurrence of a significant event that altered the landscape of civil rights in America, and lessons from it that are applicable to today's current atmosphere. This could be something from the 60s, or this could be something more recent if you're closer to my age. So please, allow you 5-10 minutes, and we'll pick up after.
My name is Catherine Bonfilio. I know quite a few of you here today. It's so great to see so many familiar and new faces. I'm with Belmont Against Racism. As many of you know, we've still have a lot of work to do. Apparently the original folks, and I think Mike Collins and Bev Friedman are here, I guess the original goal was to end racism by the year 2000 here in Belmont, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us. I wanted to thank the Chamber singers for lifting their beautiful voices. I want to give a particular shout out to the Human Rights Commission. Belmont Against Racism used to run this event. We've turned it over to them, and boy, what a fabulous job, and particularly Tony Moroso. Thank you. I also wanted to thank Representative Rushing, Ann Black, and Belmont for your inspiring remarks. How honored we are here today to have Representative Rushing's wisdom and long social justice advocacy, as well as our passionate young people who give us just enormous hope for the future. Thank you all. I wanted to also give a few shout outs because there are people who are working, who are actively commemorating. I don't know if Senator Brownsberger is still here, but both our state representatives, Mr. Rushing and Dave Rogers, have worked on criminal justice reform. But Senator Brownsberger has worked tirelessly to get criminal justice reform through, and we're hoping that Massachusetts will be a model for the country on criminal justice reform when it comes through. So that's a great thing. I also want to thank the school department because they are currently involved in addressing inequities that exist in education. So for all the staff and teachers who are working on that, and they actually work with the Black and Belmont students as well, thank you for that work. We really appreciate it. And I wanted to give a shout out, two more shout outs. One to the Boston Belmont Friends group. This is a group that puts together some families from Metco and our Belmont families. And in doing so, they gain friendships and understanding, and it's a fabulous organization. And we talked about housing, and I want to give one last shout out. There is among us. Where is Anna Covina Goldberg and Connie Williams? Stand up for a second. There might be a few more. These were the original fair housing people. And Preston Williams. Preston, please stand up. Way before, and Laura Miller, who couldn't be here today, way before Belmont Against Racism existed. Oh, and Ann Paulson. I'm sorry, Ann, how could I forget you? There existed a fair housing group, which brings us back to many of the things that Representative Rushing was speaking about this morning. So we're fortunate here. This is the fundraising part of the program. We're fortunate to have Metco here because it allows that exchange from the urban-suburban experience, and we all gain from that. And for many of us, we've made true long-term friendships through the Metco program. And so while school is about academics, it's really after school that we make our connections. And I don't know if many of you know about our Metco students, but they wake up around 5 o'clock in the morning, take often 2 trains and a bus to get to school and to get home at night. And they still have homework to do, so I'm always just amazed at what they do to get a good education and to join us here in Belmont. So one of the things that we know is that after-school activities are where we make our connections. And it's where you learn sort of the true meaning of teamwork, if you're participating in a play or in a chorus, if you are on a team. And these are invaluable experiences. Our Metco, and so what I want to do is to say that for those students who participate in after-school activities from Metco, they often have to take the train home in the cold and the dark. And this is where the Metco Support Fund comes in, and Principal Richards mentioned this earlier. The Metco Support Fund was established by Belmont Against Racism, but it's administered by the school department. It's used primarily for transportation. It provides taxis from after school directly to the student's home, so it's safe and reliable service for the students, so they can participate fully in our school programs. And so our students have the opportunity to make connections on all sides. The breakfast here today is the primary fundraiser for the after-school fund. The fund is also used for other programs across all of the schools that bring our students together. So we have made it really, really easy for you to participate this morning. There are several ways in which you can help. One is that there is at the back of the room, Steve Friedman and John Robotham. They'll be happy to take your credit card, and you can go back there with your credit card reader. If you have a check, on your table you will see a manila envelope. You may write the check out to BAR, just simply B-A-R, write Metco on the byline, and slip it in the envelope. Now, if you forgot your checkbook and you want to do one at home, take home your program. The address is on there, P.O. Box 649, Belmont, Massachusetts, and you can do that. However, because we're modern, you can also pick up your smartphone, dial in www.belmontagainstracism.org, scroll down to the yellow button, it says donate, and there you go, you can donate online. So again, 3 ways to participate here this morning. John and Steve in the back of the room with the credit cards. Write your check and stick it in the envelope and someone will come around, or online at Belmont Against Racism and donate. And yes, yeah, we will accept cash, as our former board member, June Roberts, tells us. So all of that will be in the envelope. We are going to hear, I guess, a little of Mavis Staples while you folks do that, and then members from BAR will come around and collect the envelopes. And for those of you who want to continue and commemorate Dr. King, I encourage you to join Belmont Against Racism or attend the Human Rights Commission meetings and we can all go forward from here. Thank you so much.
We're going to move towards wrapping things up here today, so if you wouldn't mind, have a seat, and we will be finishing up shortly. And I know that there's been some questions that's been raised. For people's information, BAR is a 501c3 organization, so please make note of that. Thank you, Catherine and Belmont Against Racism. Although the Human Rights Commission organized this event, it couldn't happen without BAR, and that's the truth. They are very helpful in getting this done. Questions, this is my first time doing it, so I leaned on them, and they were very supportive and helpful. So thank you to Belmont Against Racism and Catherine. Moving towards the close of things, just put a few things on your radar. Belmont Against Racism, the Human Rights Commission, Belmont Books, the Belmont Public Library, and Friends of Belmont Public Library are hosting a night with Gish Jen, the author of The Girl at the Baggage Claim, explaining the East-West culture gap. And we invite all of you to attend. It is free. It's taking place at the Belmont Public Library's Assembly Room on Tuesday, February 6th, 7 p.m. And again, that's at the library's Assembly Room. And there are little tiny placards at your tables. If you'd like to take one with you, please feel free to do so. Next, I invite Joan Horgan from the New Roads Catholic Community Program to speak a little bit about a refugee program going on here in Belmont.
Thank you, Tony. My name is Joan Horgan, and I'm a member of the Social Justice Committee at New Roads Catholic Community. And just a year ago, our parish collaborative became a pilot site for a new program under the Catholic Charities Resettlement Agency called the POWER Program, POWR, stands for People or Parishes Organized to Welcome Refugees. And we have already helped resettle 2 refugee families. The first family in February came from the Congo, 3 adult siblings, and they had been in a refugee camp in Burundi for 15 years. When they arrived, we found that they had relatives in Worcester, so they got resettled there. So our goal was to resettle a family in Belmont, and we were kind of given the impression this was definitely an impossible dream. But we were able to do that with the help and collaboration of the other religious faith communities in Belmont. One of our local parishioners dropped the rent in the apartment so they could afford it. So we received and welcomed a family of 4 from Iran who are now resettled in Belmont. When we adopt a family through this POWER program, we are responsible for finding and furnishing an apartment and providing everything the family needs until they're self-supporting. So in order to continue doing that, we are holding a benefit concert on February 3rd at Payson Park Church, which has been one of our great collaborators. The theme for the concert is Powered by Kindness, and we will have the Belmont Festival Orchestra, the Powers Music School, and other individual performers. We are also making it an educational event. We'll have representatives from a family from Syria, Iran, and Haiti talk between the performances about their experience of coming to America. So I want to invite you to attend and help support the POWER program. And one of the things that have impressed me most is the kindness and generosity of the people of Belmont and the collaboration with all the other religious communities. And I'm very proud to be a resident of Belmont. We were this year, during the summer, designated as a welcoming community. And we hope to continue that tradition of collaboration. So we hope to see you at the concert and come and enjoy and learn and meet our new neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to invite former Selectman Bill Skelly to speak about the program Inner City. Bill?
Well, thank you. I'd like to, this is very interesting. This young man over here, I went over and talked to him for a while, and I said, it's very interesting what he's gone through. And I said, in a strange way, I went through a similar thing in reverse. What it meant was my lovely wife convinced me to go work at a place called Polaroid way back then, and to go work at the inner city business in downtown Boston. And it was wonderful. We had 35 staff people working with us and 150 young people, 95% were black, and helped them find a job and get a career. Did that for 2 months. They sent me someplace else and they called me back. And the top boss, which I'll talk about in a minute, Dick Lawson in Newton, said, Bill, we're going to put you in charge. It's the first time a white guy is going to be running the program. And I was very, very blessed because I had a lot of great people working with me. And after I was there for 5 years. After the second year, we became the best in America, helping people get jobs and helping them with their careers. It was a great experience. And it's funny, about 4 or 5 months ago, I started talking to 3 of my old friends in that process. Jim Wells, who's with me, yeah, that's me many years ago, and a woman in Boston, and a woman down in Florida because she's been ill. And the 4 of us are going to start a program because we're not very happy what's happening. And what we did many years ago, we believe that we can get this done from a different perspective. And we're now reaching out to people in Greater Boston. You know, we'll do some work, but we're going to get people to come in and work with us and get this going again. And it was a great experience for me. One of the best things for me was, again, I was probably 35. Yeah, a long time ago. And young boy came in, 24 years old, black boy, and he wanted to become a fireman, of which my father was. And he said, no, it won't work, we won't get it done, they don't do things to help us. And I worked very close with him, and it was just a great experience for me, because about 9 months later, I became a fireman in Boston. And we have, thank God, 4 of us working together. We want to get going. We're very upset about this, what's happening with the guns in our area. And as you can see, they happen all the time. And we're going to get going on this. And anyone who has any ideas or any interest working with us, please let us know. I am talking to groups in Boston now. And we're trying to get them to do what we did 40 years ago. It's been a long time. So any of you that have some ideas, like we're going to keep talking, I'd appreciate it. And give me some ideas. And I have plenty of these because I'm giving these out to different people in downtown Boston about what we did many years ago and what we know we can do again. Again, after our second, well, with my team, we became the best in America, and it was so great to watch, on average, 150 young people, 95% black, in Boston, getting a job and a career that in most cases, they never found that. So we want to replicate it and keep it going. If you have any questions after I step down, be happy to talk with you. All right, because this is something that's going to benefit all of us, And I'm fortunate to have 3 of my old timers working with me, and we're talking to businesses in Boston now. Question. I'll give it to you. I'll come over. My skills are very limited. I've been around for a long time. Yeah, a long time. I started here in Belmont when I was 5, from Cambridge, and it's a great community and so forth, and I'm looking forward to talking more. So yeah, any other questions before I step down? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you very much.
One last. Bill. The name? Inner City. And that was Bill Skelly. We are going to close with a prayer from Reverend Gary Richards from the Belmont Watertown United Methodist Church. Before we reach that point, I'd just like to say thank you to, excuse me, because after this is all. I'd just like to thank everybody, the Belmont Schools Department, the Superintendent's Office, the custodial staff here, the Belmont Media Center, Belmont Against Racism. This is all put on. It takes a village. It's not one group, not one person. So I know that I'm not mentioning everybody, and I apologize. It's not comprehensive, but thank you to those groups and many more for your help. I'm going to leave you with 2 thoughts, 2 quotes that stuck out to me when I was preparing for today. The first quote I was reminded of recently, and that was, "I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples." That was the late Mother Teresa. And of course, Dr. Martin Luther King taught us that the time is always right to do what is right. I encourage everyone to do what is right, cast a stone, and see the ripples go. And I also like to mention the children are back, so if you have a child that went to childcare, please go get them before you leave. Reverend Gary Richards, please.
I'd like to invite you to stand if you're comfortable doing so. My prayer will combine some thoughts and words from the Honorable Representative Byron Rusting, who calls us to be dangerous people, and what I may say are some dangerous times. And so I ask you to be in the spirit of prayer with me. God of many names in all places, you know the stormy road that we trod. We pray that you will accompany us on the way and on the path that you call us to travel. Help us, O God, to join in the efforts to destroy that which is destructive. Help us, O God, to resurrect that which is constructive. And as a community and as individuals, oh God, help us to respect all, to see in one another and in our neighbors you. And finally, help us to be dangerous and to dare to be bold to fight for a just criminal justice system, for fair and equitable education, and for housing, particularly for those that are without a home and on the streets on this cold day, and for a new vision of an inclusive, affordable housing strategy and possibility here in our community. Guide our path as we lead this place, and until we meet again, may we live for and in peace. Amen.
For coming out today. If there are any volunteers that have some time in their schedule this morning to help us clean up and put things back to order, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you to everyone again for coming out and getting this organized for today. Thank you.